For almost a century, scientists believed humanity shared one connected genetic story, different races, different languages, different borders, but ultimately, one human family. They were wrong. In the early 2000s, researchers began comparing DNA samples from populations around the world: Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, Rowan Islands hidden deep in the Pacific, frozen villages near the Arctic Circle, ancient skeletons buried beneath caves and deserts. At first, everything matched expectations. Migration routes appeared exactly where scientists predicted. Civilizations left visible genetic footprints. Human history finally looked traceable, understandable. Then one result appeared on a computer screen, a result nobody expected. One population carried genetic markers unlike almost any other group alive today. Some sequences looked incredibly ancient, others seemed strangely isolated. And a few patterns should not have survived at all. The researchers thought the machines were malfunctioning. They repeated the tests. Again and again, the results never changed. What they found shocked everyone, because this wasn't just about ancestry anymore. It raised a darker possibility. One human population may have remained genetically separated for thousands of years, while hidden inside modern civilization itself. So what really happened? To understand that mystery, you have to go back long before DNA laboratories existed. Back before computers mapped human genomes, back when history was reconstructed from bones buried beneath stone and sand. For generations, scientists believed human migration followed a simple pattern. Modern humans emerged in Africa, small groups spread outward over thousands of years, into Europe, into Asia, across frozen land bridges into the Americas. Over time, populations mixed repeatedly, trade connected civilizations, empires expanded, wars displaced millions, humanity blended together again and again. At least, that was the official story, and for a long time, the evidence supported it. Archaeologists uncovered ancient tools across Africa. Human remains appeared in Europe dating back tens of thousands of years. Genetic similarities connected populations separated by oceans. Humanity looked deeply interconnected, messy and complicated. Predictable, but then something changed. By the late 20th century, genetic technology evolved rapidly. Scientists could now examine tiny mutations hidden deep inside human DNA. Patterns invisible to earlier researchers suddenly became clear. Entire migration histories could now be reconstructed from blood alone. It was revolutionary because written history often lies. Empires rewrite their past. Civilizations destroy records. Victors erase inconvenient truths. But DNA remembers everything. Every migration, every famine, every isolation event, every forgotten ancestor. Hidden inside every living human was a biological archive stretching back thousands of years. Researchers around the world rushed to study it. Massive genome projects began collecting DNA samples from hundreds of populations. The goal sounded simple: human diversity, trace ancient migrations, understand where humanity came from. But inside the data, researchers noticed something disturbing. One anomaly kept appearing repeatedly, rare, at first almost invisible. Researchers assumed contamination. Laboratory mistakes happen constantly in genetic studies, especially during the early years. One mislabeled sample can distort everything. So they cleaned the data, recalibrated machines. Repeated sequencing, still anomaly remained. One population showed unusually high levels of genetic distinctiveness, far beyond what researchers expected, not separate from humanity, still fully human, but genetically distant enough to raise serious questions. At first, almost nobody outside academia noticed. The public barely understood DNA science back then. Genetics sounded futuristic, complicated, abstract. But inside universities and laboratories, tension was growing. One study became three became 10. Different research teams reached similar conclusions independently. And the results refused to disappear. This is where the story gets strange, because the mystery population did not live inside complete isolation. They were not hidden in an untouched jungle, not trapped on some distant island beyond civilization. They existed within modern society, near trade routes, near neighboring populations, near centuries of recorded history. And yet their DNA remained unusually distinct. Why? That question haunted researchers. Some believed geography explained everything: mountains, ice-harsh environments, natural barriers capable of limiting human interaction for centuries. But the explanation never fully worked, because nearby populations did not show the same patterns. Only one group carried the anomaly so strongly, and the deeper scientists investigated, older the mystery became. By the early 2010s, ancient DNA research transformed anthropology forever. Scientists learned how to extract genetic material directly from ancient skeletons. Suddenly, researchers could compare living humans against people who died thousands of years ago. The results changed everything. Ancient Europeans looked genetically different from modern Europeans. The Americas showed evidence of multiple migration waves. Asia revealed far more complexity than historians expected. Human history stopped resembling a straight line. It started resembling shattered glass, fragments everywhere. Some populations vanished completely. Others merged together repeatedly, but one genetic signal kept resurfacing: ancient, piecered, unusual, and deeply connected to the same mystery population researchers already struggled to explain. At first, scientists underestimated its importance. Then one team noticed something terrifying. The genetic markers appeared older than expected, much older, older than several neighboring populations. That alone was strange. But another detail changed everything. The population showed evidence of long-term isolation, without total separation from civilization. That should have been impossible. Normally, isolated populations remain geographically cut off: reem islands, deep valleys, deciduous forests. But this group existed near major migration zones. People should have mixed constantly. Yet somehow, their genetic distinctions survived generation after generation, century after century. Almost untouched, scientists began asking dangerous questions. Were accepted migration models incomplete? Had historians misunderstood ancient population movement entirely, or had this population intentionally remained separate for thousands of years? No one expected what came next. Because the mystery grew darker once researchers examined ancient burial sites, one excavation changed everything. At first, the site looked ordinary: stone tools, broken pottery. Human bones buried beneath layers of soil, nothing unusual. Then DNA analysis began. The skeletons carried similarities linked to the mystery population. That alone surprised researchers. But one detail stunned them. The burial site was far older than expected, thousands of years older, meaning the genetic pattern existed far deeper in history than anyone imagined. The implications were enormous. If correct, population N had preserved ancient ancestry for an unimaginable length of time. While surrounding civilization firms transformed repeatedly through migration and conquest, researchers immediately faced skepticism. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. Other scientists challenged the findings aggressively. Some blamed contamination. Others accused the researchers of exaggeration. The debate exploded across academic journals. But repeated studies kept pointing toward the same conclusion. Something unusual existed inside this population's ancestry, something ancient, something remarkably preserved. And nobody fully understood why. Meanwhile, genome sequencing technology improved rapidly. Researchers could now examine millions of genetic markers simultaneously, parts invisible before suddenly became obvious. And the more data scientists collected, stranger the mystery became. The population showed evidence of surviving ancient bottlenecks, periods when human populations collapsed dramatically. Most groups show heavy mixing afterward, but this population appeared unusually stable, almost protected from outside influence. How? Why? The questions multiplied faster than answers. Some researchers proposed cultural explanations, street marriage traditions, long-term social separation, deep ancestral identity preserved across generations. Others still believed geography mattered most. Harsh environments discourage migration. Ramen regions limit interaction naturally. But no explanation solved every contradiction because the evidence refused to fit neatly together. Yes, the population interacted with neighboring civilizations, but the genetic distinction remained unusually strong. Yes, migration occurred, but ancient markers survived against all expectations. Yes, empires rose and collapsed nearby, but the population's genetic continuity endured. It made no sense. And that question has never been fully answered. By now, international interest was growing rapidly. Governments funded massive ancestry studies. Private DNA companies entered the market. Millions of ordinary people gained access to genetic testing once limited to elite laboratories. The public became obsessed with ancestry. People wanted to know where they came from, who their ancestors were, what hidden stories existed inside their blood. But researchers understood something most people didn't. DNA rarely provides clean answers. It reveals fragments, echoes, probabilities. Human history is chaotic. And genetic evidence can destroy centuries of accepted belief overnight, which is exactly what happened next. Because one new international study compared ancient genomes from multiple continents simultaneously. The goal sounded simple: build a clearer timeline of human migration. Instead, researchers uncovered another anomaly linked directly to the mystery population. Certain genetic markers connected them to incredibly ancient ancestry branches. Branches that separated earlier than expected from surrounding populations. The discovery stunned scientists because it suggested continuity stretching deep into prehistory. Some researchers described the group as a living genetic time capsule. Others immediately rejected the phrase. Too sensational, too dangerous, because genetics carries a dark history. Throughout the 20th century, pseudoscience caused catastrophic harm. Scientists became extremely cautious discussing human difference publicly. And rightly so. Genetic variation between populations remains very small overall, far smaller than extremists historically claimed, but this discovery still demanded explanation. Not because the population was less or more human, but because their ancestry appeared unusually ancient and remarkably preserved. The distinction mattered enormously. Unfortunately, public discussion rarely handles nuance well. Media headlines exaggerated results wildly. Articles hinted at hidden races and lost human origins. Most serious scientists hated that language. Because the truth was more complicated and far more unsettling. The mystery wasn't about discovering a non-human population hiding among us. It was about realizing human history remained deeply incomplete. Entire chapters may still be missing, and DNA kept exposing those missing pieces. Then researchers expanded their investigation beyond one population, and they discovered something even stranger. Faint traces of similar ancient markers existed elsewhere across the world. Tiny remnants, barely detectable. But connected, it suggested something enormous. Long ago, ancient human populations may have been far more diverse than historians realized. Some vanished completely. Others merged together over thousands of years. A few survived only in fragments. And one population somehow preserved more of that ancient ancestry than almost anyone else alive today. The realization changed anthropology forever. Human history no longer looked clean and organized. It looked haunted, filled with vanished migrations, forgotten bloodlines, ancient survivors hidden inside modern humanity, and researchers still couldn't explain one critical detail. Why did this population remain so genetically distinct while countless others blended together over time. Everything pointed toward isolation. One logical explanation: geographic barriers. Limited intermarriage, cultural separation, still predictable, but there was one problem. Historical records showed extensive outside contact with neighboring civilizations. Trade existed, migration existed, interaction existed, meaning the population should have mixed heavily over time, but the DNA told a different story. And hidden inside one ancient burial analysis, researchers discovered a clue that threatened to unravel everything: a single genetic sequence, rare, unexpected, connected to an ancestry branch scientists barely understood. That sequence changed the investigation completely because it forced researchers to consider a terrifying possibility. What if human history was far more fragmented than anyone ever imagined? What if entire populations once existed and vanished so completely only faint traces survived inside modern DNA? The deeper scientists looked, more humanity's past stopped resembling history and started resembling ruins. Part 2. The Ancient branch everything pointed toward one answer. Ancient isolation preserved rare ancestry. Case closed. But there was one thing researchers hadn't examined closely enough: one burial, one genome. One detail buried deep beneath thousands of years of history, a detail that would change the investigation forever. The skeleton was discovered during a routine excavation connected to an ancient settlement site. Nothing about the burial initially seemed unusual. No treasure, no strange artifacts, no signs of violence. Just bones resting beneath layers of soil and stone. But once genetic sequencing began, researchers noticed something impossible. The individual carried ancestry markers, linked both to the mystery population, and to an ancient branch scientists believed had mostly disappeared long ago. At first, researchers assumed contamination again. Ancient DNA work is notoriously fragile. Modern human contact can corrupt results instantly, so the team repeated the sequencing. Then independent laboratories repeated it again. The results stayed identical. No one expected what came next, because the ancient branch appeared older than many surrounding human lineages, far older. Meaning fragments of extremely ancient ancestry may have survived far longer than researchers believed possible. The implications were staggering. Humanity's genetic history was not a straight line. It was a web, a tangled network of populations appearing, disappearing, merging, and surviving in fragments. Some groups vanished entirely, others left faint traces behind. And one population seemed to preserve echoes of an ancient world most humans forgot existed. Researchers expanded their analysis rapidly. Ancient skeletons from multiple regions were re-examined. Burial sites, once considered unimportant, suddenly became critical. Again and again, faint traces of similar ancestry appeared, tiny fragments scattered across continents. Like broken pieces of something much older, something once widespread, then almost completely erased. But one detail disturbed scientists more than anything else. The mystery population preserved these ancient markers at unusually high levels, far higher than surrounding groups, which meant one thing: somehow, across thousands of years of war, migration, empire, famine, and collapse, they remained unusually continuous. Why would that happen? Why would one population preserve ancient ancestry while others blended repeatedly? Researchers searched for explanations everywhere: geography, culture, climate, social traditions, disease patterns, isolation events, but every answer created new contradictions because history showed constant human interaction in the region. Trade routes connected civilizations for centuries. Empires expanded through the area repeatedly. Neighboring populations mixed constantly. Yet the genetic distinction endured, generation after generation. It made no sense. Then historians noticed something strange buried inside ancient records: repeated references to isolated communities, avoiding outsiders. Ancient travelers described groups who rarely intermarried, groups obsessed with ancestry and bloodlines, groups who believed outsiders threatened their identity. At first, historians dismissed the stories as exaggeration. Ancient writers often distorted foreign cultures, but combined with the DNA evidence, accounts became harder to ignore. Could cultural isolation really preserve ancient ancestry for thousands of years? Some scientists believed so, others remained skeptical. Because maintaining strong genetic continuity across such enormous stretches of time is extraordinarily difficult, especially near major migration zones, yet somehow, population managed it. And that question still haunts researchers today. Modern DNA studies continue uncovering new surprises constantly. Entire branches of human ancestry, once considered extinct, now appear faintly inside living populations. Ancient interbreeding events changed humanity forever. Lost migrations continue emerging from forgotten skeletons. The deeper science advances, stranger humanity becomes. Because the truth is unsettling, human history is not complete. Large portions remain missing. Entire populations vanished without written records. Ancient peoples disappeared so completely their existence survived only inside fragments of DNA. And somewhere inside modern humanity, their echoes remain. That realization changed anthropology forever. Not because it proved myths about hidden races. It didn't. But because it revealed how fragile history truly is. Civilizations believe they understand the past, until science uncovers something buried beneath it, something older, something forgotten, something that refuses to disappear. And the most unsettling part? Researchers still don't fully understand why this population remains so genetically distinct. The evidence exists, the patterns are real. But the full explanation remains incomplete. Some scientists believe future discoveries will solve the mystery. Others think humanity's past may simply be too fragmented to reconstruct perfectly. Too many populations vanished, too many migrations left incomplete traces, too much history disappeared before writing even existed, and somewhere, right now, inside a laboratory freezer, or buried beneath untouched earth, another ancient genome may already hold the missing piece. We just haven't found it yet.